Syracuse football's start to the season hasn't exactly been the cleanest. A tough loss to Tennessee and an ugly overtime win against UConn. So what was it going to take for the Orange to finally freshen up? Well, Colgate. SU brushed the Raiders away 66-24, and my analysts have all the minty fresh takes and knowledge you'll need. We'll break down the big plays, the bright spots, and also where the Qs still need to polish up a little. Orange Press Pass starts right now. Yes, I just swallowed toothpaste. And welcome into our CitrusTV studio for another edition of Orange Press Pass. Max Gifford, Josh Solomon, and Sydney Chan with you after a 66-24 win for the Orange over the Raiders today. And I mean, wow, what a win for Syracuse after a tough start to this season, to say the least, despite the Orange being 1-1. But Josh, what were your first thoughts after a win, all things considered, against an FCS opponent?
Yeah, absolutely, Max. Now, everything I feel like we say, we have to take it with a grain of salt because of what you just mentioned, that it was against an FCS opponent, Sydney. However, this O-line looked really good tonight. You talk about 9 sacks over the first 2 games for Syracuse, 5 that they took against Tennessee, 4 against UConn. But tonight, a nice goose egg, 0. Steve Angeli, we saw him succeed again with the passing yards tonight, over 400. We're going to talk about him a lot tonight, but the running back, Will Nixon, the starter, because Yasin Willis was out, he did very well too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have another positive first thought, and that's that Darrell Gill Jr. really played great. He has a lot to be proud of from this one. 152 yards, a career best 2 touchdowns. Those are his first scores of the season. Last season, he only scored 2 touchdowns total. This is already a great start. I'm really looking forward to seeing him more as we head into conference play. And the whole Pandora box of a gauntlet of a schedule begins soon.
And it's been a lot of negatives so far through this point of the season, but plenty of positives from Sydney and Josh, and plenty of positives to take away from this game today. Let's show you how this one broke down inside the dome. It's a whiteout in the dome, but Colgate's wearing the white uniforms? Oh, well, I guess that's not a big deal. But Syracuse getting points, that's a big deal. Early on, too, Steve Angeli linking up with Justice Ross Simmons, 26 yards to the house to put SU up 7-0. And the scoring would just continue from there, but also SU's defense was holding strong as well. How about an interception from Raheem Long Jr.? Get up, big man. Syracuse still with this lead in the first quarter, really just dominating on the offensive end, and especially Darrell Gill. Sydney touched on it a little, just how good that he was this contest, and he just seemed a lot more comfortable throughout this game.
No, absolutely. He really showed up, and being able to actually get those 2 touchdowns just in the first half has to be given tons to his confidence, especially going into harder opponents moving on.
He ended up with over 150 yards and multiple touchdowns, the first Syracuse receiver to do that since 2019. And Steve Angeli was doing very similar things. He was making some history of his own. You see the long pass right there to Darrell Gill once again for another first down, but he ended up having 6 total touchdowns on the day. He was the 4th SU QB all-time to be responsible for 6 touchdowns in a game. Guys in that list, Eric Dungy, Jim Brown, Zach Mahoney. Syracuse up big at halftime, but then came the negative. Ricky Collins finally gets his chance into the ball game, and just like that, now you see him, now you don't. You see it right there. He's gone, and Jelly's back in the game. That time linking up with Gabe Daniels. Plenty of different faces scoring for this Syracuse squad, and it was fun to see so many different players get involved toward the end of this game, Josh.
So many different players getting involved, and Fran Brown likes to praise how many true freshmen are on this roster, and I feel like they all showed out tonight, or at least a lot of them did.
Yeah, the only one that we didn't necessarily show you. How about Luke Carney, the freshman QB, getting into the end zone at the end of the game after Ricky Collins lost his helmet in the red zone, so couldn't play to get into the end zone. But a big play for Carney, and you have to be impressed with just how well Angeli and especially Will Nixon did with Yasin Willis out of this ball game. But the good news is that we can't never quite be impressed with the Syracuse squad. You mentioned Josh just taking this game with a grain of salt as a whole, but now it's time to bring in our reporter today from today's contest, Kiran Costa. I mean, Kiran, we said, granted, it's an FCS opponent, so take this game with a grain of salt, but despite the level of competition, who was impressing you tonight on the SU end?
Well, Max, the obvious answer is Steve Angeli. I mean, 6 total touchdowns. He finds his name in some pretty good company, but I think my answer is Demetrius Samuel Jr. Have a day for the 17-year-old kid. He did it in all 3 facets of the game, Max. His first collegiate offensive touchdown, his first collegiate interception, and a nice little punt return as well on the special teams. Fran Brown and this coaching staff have themselves a weapon, and they can slot him in just about wherever they like.
Kiran, it's really great to see you in the Dome tonight. I want to ask about what is going on with Steve Angeli and Ricky Collins in that press conference with Fran Brown after the game. Did head coach Fran Brown mention anything to do with putting in Collins for the drive and then taking him out and then putting him back in with the QB carousel? It seemed like that was happening tonight. Did Fran Brown give any context about that?
I mean, QB carousel indeed. How about 3 different quarterbacks involved in scores for the Orange? But you know Coach Fran Brown, he plays his cards close to the chest. He said after the first time they brought Ricky Collins into the game, he throws the interception. That was a tough drive for Collins. After that, that leads to a Colgate touchdown. What Coach Fran Brown said was what the team needed then was their leader and the face of their team. He had so much praise for Steve Angeli, saying he's grown as a leader. He showed himself as a leader today and through the first 3 weeks. Rather than a carousel, I think Fran Brown wanted just a little bit more peace of mind going back to Angeli, but I mean, we all know that wasn't the best look, having to go back, forth, and then back again. But Steve Angeli is Fran Brown's QB1, and that's just who he wanted in that moment.
Hi, Kiran. I'm sure it was an absolutely electric game in the Dome, a huge win for the Orange. But given this was against an FCC team, did this game give you any more confidence heading into conference play?
Well, Sydney, I wish I could say yes, but I don't really think it did. The benchmark is to beat a team like Colgate 66-24. You probably want to beat them more like 66-6. So I'm not that much more confident than I am before this game. I can't get that UConn game out of my mind. You shouldn't get pushed to overtime by a team like that. You do take care of business against a team like Colgate. I will say this, though, if they can play Clemson close, I'd take a lot more away from a close loss down in Death Valley next week than a blowout win at home against an FCS school like Colgate, that you should win it by this margin every single time.
Maybe not too much confidence for Syracuse headed into conference play, but we always have confidence in our reporter, Kiran Costa. Kiran, thanks so much for the time. After the win tonight in the Dome comes with heavy hearts. I mean, following a tremendous loss for the former member of the Orange family tonight, former Syracuse women's basketball star Tiana Mungakaya died after a long and courageous battle with cancer. Tiana was a record breaker on the court, with the program's record in assists in a single game, season, and career. But her strength off the court left an even bigger mark. Mungakaya was first diagnosed with breast cancer in 2019, and even after countless rounds of chemotherapy, it returned just 4 years later. She passed away at 30 years old, an All-American athlete and an even better human being. Tiana was a shining light and defined toughness. Our hearts and prayers are with the Mungakaya family tonight, and her impact will never be forgotten. Orange Press Pass will be right back after this. Lots of smiles here tonight in Syracuse after a 66-24 win over Colgate. Max Gifford, Josh Solomon, and Sydney Chan back with you inside our CitrusTV studio. Guys, there's been plenty of action here in the Dome tonight, but plenty of action around the hill as well. I mean, plenty of teams in action, particularly you look in the bottom left corner. Josh, your former B team, the volleyball team, fallen to Colgate tonight. So I guess one team comes out victorious, one not necessarily.
The Orange hadn't beaten the Colgate Raiders since back in 2012, and Max, you're exactly right, because it didn't happen tonight. Now, I want to say 6-1 on the season. It took 7 games to lose their first one of the year for the Orange. But I'm not trying to say anything. When I was the beat reporter last year, that team went 12-0 undefeated in non-conference play. So all I'm saying, shout out Ryan Croak, our CitrusTV volleyball beat reporter this season, but I don't know. All I'm saying, the team last year looked pretty good.
Well, I'll tell you what we really need is the Sydney Chan Hex, because she has propelled this field hockey team to new heights. Top 5 in the country for the first time since 2017. And how about a 1-0 win over another top 12 team in Princeton?
You said it, Max. 5 seems to be the lucky number for this SU squad. Q secures its 5th straight win, matching the best season start and longest run of ranked wins under head coach Lynn Farquhar. It finished with a penalty stroke in overtime, 2nd consecutive game in overtime for the Orange.
Who else but Bo Von Kempen to get it done as well. Plenty of action in Syracuse, so also plenty of action in college football, not only happening tonight, but coming up this weekend. So many good games on the slate. I know my eyes are directed toward the Georgia-Tennessee game in the corner down in Neyland Stadium, but any other ones stick out to you guys?
I think South Florida-Miami is definitely a game you have to talk about, because that run that the Bulls have been on so far this season, knocking off Boise State and Florida, 2 former top 25 teams. Now Carson back in Miami. Can they do it again, Max? Can they do it again? That's what I'm looking forward to watching.
That Georgia-Tennessee game is going to be super interesting. I've got my eyes on the Clemson-Georgia Tech, especially because Syracuse is going to be going to Clemson next weekend, getting into ACC play. That'll be definitely interesting to watch.
I've also got a special place in my heart for that Wisconsin-Alabama game. My sister are Wisconsin Badgers, so on Wisconsin tomorrow. They probably are going to get crushed down in Tuscaloosa, but Syracuse did the crushing today against Colgate, and we were talking plenty about the SEC. One of Syracuse's quarterbacks, the backup variety, Ricky Collins, came from an SEC school last year at LSU. Got to see him play his first snaps in a Syracuse uniform, which was to be expected, but maybe not the results we necessarily thought we'd see off the jump.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. Fran Brown in the press conference after the game kept on talking about he's a winner, he's a winner. I didn't see a winner on the field tonight when I saw Ricky Collins. That first drive with less than 5 minutes left in the third quarter. What did I see from Ricky Collins? A bad throw out of bounds and an interception on a ball that was underthrown towards the sideline. That's what I saw tonight. That's not winning material, Sydney.
Yeah, I mean, when we were all watching the game together, we could kind of exclaiming when we saw him come in, when we saw him come out right after that opening drive. And I mean, like you said earlier, he got some action later in the fourth quarter, but that's definitely not how he wanted his SU debut to go.
And maybe it's a little bit of first game jitters with Ricky Collins.
Perhaps.
You can't necessarily blame the guy that he's been sitting on the bench for pretty much the entirety of this season so far, and then kind of getting thrown into the fire. Now, I'm sure he had plenty of time to warm up, but still, again, Collins got a lot better the second time he came in after throwing that interception to Tatum Johnson. The other big story coming into this game, the first one being if Collins would get playing time over Angeli, it's that Will Nixon was taking over the tailback position for Yasin Willis, who is out this game with at least an injury. Don't know if he'll be back next week or not.
I like the kind of quotes there, Matt.
At least
injury.
At least out for now, at least sitting out for this game. But I know personally I was pretty impressed with what Will Nixon did on the field, especially just kind of grounded and pounded and gained in 2 or 3 yards every single time he got the ball.
No, absolutely. 66 yards on 12 carries, averaging about 6 yards a carry, which is pretty good. Like you were saying earlier, especially not having started in that last game, getting a lot more action, and yeah, he impressed me.
I think Will Nixon tonight, now, again, we just did those air quotes with Yasin Willis' injury. I think he was basically a healthy scratch tonight. If it was like Tennessee week 1 or this ACC loaded schedule coming up, he would have played. Only 12 rushes, but averaged 6 yards per carry. I think it was a great night for the running back, but, and it's a big but, he did have that fumble early on. I think that's definitely something to note. It's something that Fran Brown said after the game that he honestly forgot about, and then he talked to him about it a little bit at halftime.
Well, I mean, just look at the comparison between Nixon this entire season compared to the Colgate game today. Now that I know the first two games were a little weird in terms of rushing because Syracuse only seemed to run the ball in game one against Tennessee.
Yeah,
but in the second game, they tended to not run the ball as much. I mean, that's why Angeli had over 40 to 50 passes. Now, I know you gave plenty of credit to the offensive line, but you have to give plenty of credit to Syracuse's defensive line and just the defense as a whole. We heard Kiran talk about Demetrius Samuel Jr. And what he did, but it was good. Finally fun to see Syracuse's defense get into a little bit of a groove.
Absolutely. I mean, watching Syracuse's defense tonight, and I have to talk about Demetrius Samuel. I know that that's exactly what Kiran touched on, but the 17-year-old who we've heard all about so far to start the season tonight had that breakout game. 5 tackles, 3 pass breakups, an interception in the end zone as well to save a touchdown. But I said on back-to-back questions, there's a bounce back here, and not in a positive light. Something else to touch on is just 2 sacks for SU's D-line that Max talked about. And SU gave up 21 second-half points against an FCS team, Sydney.
Absolutely, and giving up over 300 passing yards, over 100 rushing yards. That's not what you want to do against a team like Colgate, an FCS team, especially when you need to be bolstering that defense and going against these really physical opponents in the ACC.
Sydney, look at that. They allowed more passing yards against an FCS team in Colgate tonight.
And 3 turnovers.
Than they did against UConn. I mean,
Absolutely,
how are you allowing more passing yards against this squad than you did last week? It doesn't make sense to me.
No.
So it doesn't sound like Josh is convinced that we should give the OPP player of the game to the defense, but maybe we should give it to someone that Sydney already mentioned that played great. And he was so great that we're giving him the Orange Press Pass player of the game. That's right. I'm talking about Darrell Gill Jr. Making some history himself, mentioned that just the first SU receiver with 150 yards and 2 touchdowns since 2019. I mean, just look at this stat line. 6 receptions for over 150 yards as well. Both of those touchdowns were in the first half. Steve Angeli and him just had a special connection today. It's been fun to see how Gill has really gotten involved in the receiving corps after replacing such prominent names last year with Jackson Meeks and Aronde Gadsden in the fold. And we'll see how Gill adjusts to conference play, but he seems to be just an absolute wizard in these non-conference games. You go not only to this contest against Colgate, you go last year to the bowl game against Washington State and the UConn regular season contest a season ago as well. But we're not done talking about Gill and this Syracuse squad just yet. Still plenty more coverage on Orange Press Pass. We'll play a little bit of this or that with my crew and tell you the turning point in this one when we return.
Did you hear about the pony with a sore throat? He was a little horse. Can I tell you a cat joke? Just kidding. Why couldn't the Wait. Why was the basketball court all wet? Why? Because the players kept dribbling all over it. Where did Cavs go on vacation? New York.
Did you know dragging chains can spark a wildfire?
Only you can prevent wildfires.
If you're buzzed and doing this, to make yourself feel okay to drive,
CWX.
you're not okay to drive.
YGKLVW. Regular you.
Syracuse football victorious by 42 points today, 66-24 over Colgate. So we welcome you back to Orange Press Pass. Max Gifford, Josh Solomon, and Sydney Chan playing a little bit of this or that, trying to make you guys debate a little. I know you guys were already a little bit outraged with what the Syracuse defense did today, but we'll stay on the offensive end for our first question because we mentioned Yasin Willis, that healthy scratch, not playing today. Will Nixon taking over the primary halfback position. But after this game, are you convinced on maybe Will Nixon getting some more of these carries, or do you still want Willis getting the rock more?
I'm very interested with that healthy scratch, quote unquote, on how that's going to work. But I think Will Nixon deserves more carries after tonight. Again, it was a small sample size, Sydney. We talked about it a little bit earlier. Only 12 carries, but averaging about 6 yards per rush is pretty good. 5'11" that Will Nixon is. And what we saw in this game tonight, he bounced off those tackles. He gave that extra effort that I think he has a little bit of an edge over Yasin Willis. Yasin Willis, the taller back, he's a couple inches taller than him. You know what Will Nixon reminds me of? There was a guy that was in the college football playoffs last season that plays for my New York Giants. Cam Scataboo. They're the exact same height, similar weight, and that similar play style, just bouncing off tackles is what I see from Will Nixon. I'm picking him.
I wouldn't say that. I mean, I know we have a small sample size for both players, but I'm going with Yasin Willis. I still think that his show up and show out personality and his amazing debut as a starter against Tennessee was awesome. He became the first touchdown in the first player in over 2 decades to rush for over 3 touchdowns in the season opener, which was awesome. He really showed his head down rush mentality, and I think he's going to be great if we give him the rock more. I mean, granted, he's alive and healthy, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm a little more on Sydney's side here, although I appreciate you making the connection of the Scatabo and Will Nixon.
Do you see it?
Not really. I have to be completely honest. I don't see it at all.
You were the one talking during the game. We were talking about it. You said he bounces off tackles. He gives that extra effort. You know who else does that? Cam Scataboo.
Look, I like the dart. Look, I like the T, the tough in dart. I think he embodies that. But Fran Brown also said LaQuinn Allen was going to be starting on Sundays, and I think he's, 3rd or 4th string for the Jaguars right now. But that's besides the point.
That's LaQuinn Allen.
I know, it's what I'm talking about. Will Nixon's the backup. LaQuinn Allen was the starter. Another guy who's the backup is Ricky Collins. Finally got to see him play in an orange uniform today. Took us maybe a while to get to him. Finally later in that 3rd quarter, finally spelling Angeli before he went back in and then Collins went back out. But from the small sample size you saw of Ricky Collins, are you convinced maybe he could be a force to be reckoned with come conference play? Should Angeli struggle?
I mean, we talked about Ricky Collins earlier, and I don't know, from that first drive when he came in throwing that interception, that really underthrown ball to the sideline, and then also that incomplete pass right before it was not great either. You see on your screen right now the rushing abilities and scrambling out of the pocket. Maybe that's what he was going to show in the SEC, but then he transferred to Syracuse for a reason to start. And Fran Brown said he was going to start before switching to Angeli, and right now, I think he made the right decision.
I really don't. I'm going to disagree with you on this one again. And I really do think that because this was such a dominant showing, this was the time for Ricky Collins to get his reps. It was low risk, high reward. And again, yes, he may have had not as good of an opening drive. He got taken out right after, but once he came back in the 4th quarter, he felt a lot more poised. He reached Gabe Daniels, scored him his first touchdown in an
This
SC
is garbage
uniform
time against Colgate, Sydney.
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
That's
okay.
exactly my point. Do you want him to be starting in the first place against a more powerful opponent? I don't.
Yeah, unless I was reading the graphic wrong, I thought it said you thought that Ricky Collins should get more time. It didn't sound like you were convinced that he could have more time.
No, I didn't think he should get more time. That's why I liked when Steve Angeli came back. All Fran Brown talked about was leadership.
I guess the graphic lies because it said that he thought he could get more time. But, oh well.
That's all right.
But on the topic of Ricky Collins, not a lot of huge highlights in this game that you can really take away that would necessarily be the turning point in this one. But for Collins having a short leash, it was definitely the interception to Tatum Johnson where, it was about as much of a duck of an interception as you can throw. Again, maybe you give him a little bit of credit because he's been on the bench, but, that was a terrible throw. Just no matter who you're playing, you can't overthrow a ball that much.
Absolutely. Certainly the turning point of the game. And I think that if you're talking about how this game played out, with Colgate scoring the second half, the amount of points that they did with 21, Syracuse just has to do better.
Absolutely. And again, going back to my point, I do understand this is for sure a turning point. Definitely a terrible pass. But these are the types of mistakes that you make against teams like Colgate when it's not really going to affect the overall outcome of the game. So, yeah.
Well, Ricky Collins ended up having a passing touchdown, and hey, Luke Carney had a rushing touchdown. So maybe a little backup QB competition now boiling over in the Syracuse. Although I don't know if Fran Brown can take that many questions. He already gets enough out of Angeli and Brown, or Angeli and Collins. You add Luke Carney into the mix, oh boy. May not be the best mix. But the good news is we've been a good mix so far here on Orange Press Pass, but we are not quite done yet. So we'll have to tell you what's coming up for Orange Press Pass and give you our final thoughts on the other side.
Leaving hot coals improperly extinguished can cause a wildfire.
Hey guys, it's Smokey!
It looks as if Smokey is going to use the drown, stir, drown and feel technique. After the first drown, a good start. Next, another drink. And finally, a close feel.
Is it cool? Okay. Yeah. Hey Smokey, catch! Oh, my bad, Smokey.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Just a little bit more time with you to go on Orange Press Pass. Max Gifford, Josh Solomon, and Sydney Chan following the Orange's 66-24 win over the Colgate Raiders tonight. We've held these two in captivity for too long. It's time to finally let them sound off on this Syracuse team.
Syracuse fans, I know you watched a great game tonight. Syracuse scored over 60 points, but have you ever been on a wooden roller coaster before? You know how it gets really bumpy? I'm going to ask you to put your seatbelt on right now because it's going to be a bumpy ride coming up in this ACC schedule. Buckle up that seatbelt. Let's go into it a little bit. 2 of the next 3 games on the road. The first is down in Death Valley against a team that started the season in the top 5 being Clemson. You could talk about SMU. That game against a college football playoff team last season. A Georgia Tech team that when you've played them down in Atlanta, you're 0-3. And how about to end the season? Top 10 teams in Miami and Notre Dame. Both of those are on the road. So have fun tonight. Enjoy it. Enjoy the rest of your weekend of college football. But in weeks to come, I'm going to ask you with this ACC schedule to please buckle up.
Unfortunately, I don't have much of a positive sound off either, and that's that Syracuse football was chasing the wrong history tonight. In 1978, the college Division I football program split into the FCS and the FBS, and today, Colgate was just 1 field goal away from becoming the FCS school that scored the most points against Syracuse since that separation. Now in 2014, Villanova nearly lost to Syracuse 26-27 in overtime, but again, this is too close of a game, especially when we're heading into ACC play and playing all of these ranked teams that Syracuse is going to have to face off of.
How about Sydney Chan, our modern-day research Rihanna over here? My goodness, what a great poll and what a great stat. Unfortunately, maybe not on the Syracuse side, especially when you look at the contest next week. Clemson Tigers going down to Death Valley. I don't know about you guys. I personally think that Kate Klubnik's going to be too much for this Q squad.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be an interesting one for sure, especially after this Colgate matchup. I mean, Syracuse can definitely use this momentum, but they're going to have to really ramp it up.
I'm nervous about this team for sure. I mean, I mentioned it in my sound off.
Maybe your nerves will be settled next week when we have Orange Press Pass after that contest. Thanks for joining us and enjoy next week's show.